Clayton Rourke's face went white, completely white, like someone had drained all the blood right out of him. Clayton Rourke, the most expensive divorce attorney in the state, the man who never loses. He stood there with trembling hands, flipping through documents he clearly did not expect to see. Garrett Pemberton sat next to him, and anyone watching could see his confident smirk melt away like ice cream on a hot sidewalk. Pure terror replaced it. The man who told Layla to get out of his house, the man who called their daughter disgusting names, the man who thought he was about to take everything from her, he finally understood. He had already lost. But let me tell you how she got there, because 7 weeks ago, Layla Mercer was the one who thought her life was over. Layla was 34 years old, and for 10 years she believed she had a good marriage. Not perfect, but good. She had been a hospital compliance auditor before becoming a mom, a really good one, actually. She was the person who made sure hospitals and pharmaceutical companies were not committing fraud or bribery. She found hidden kickbacks for a living. She uncovered schemes that healthcare executives thought were bulletproof. But when her daughter Nola was 2 years old and got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, Garrett convinced her to stay home. Nola needed her, he said. He made enough money for both of them, he said. She could always go back to work later, he said. So Layla gave up her career to raise their child and support his dreams. Garrett worked as a medical device sales executive. High stakes, expensive dinners with doctors, enormous bonuses. The kind of job where kickbacks flowed like water and nobody asked too many questions. Funny how that works out sometimes. That Tuesday evening started like any other. Layla was making dinner, Nola was doing homework at the kitchen table, and Garrett came home early. That should have been her first warning sign. Garrett never came home early.
He loosened his tie, sat down at the table across from their daughter, and calmly announced that he had filed for divorce. Just like that. Like he was telling her he picked up dry cleaning. But then he kept talking, and every word hit Layla like a punch to the stomach. He wanted everything. The house, the cars, the investment accounts. He had already hired Clayton Rourke, and she should just accept that she was going to lose. Then he looked at Nola, their 8-year-old baby girl, who was sitting right there listening to every word, and he said something that would echo in Layla's mind for years to come. He said he did not need her or his stinky, sick daughter. He actually called her that, stinky, sick, like she was garbage to throw away. Nola burst into tears. Layla held her while her entire world collapsed around them, and Garrett just sat there looking annoyed, like their pain was an inconvenience to his schedule. The doorbell rang. Of course it did, because when your life falls apart, there is always someone waiting to make it worse. Garrett's mother, Marlene, walked in without waiting for anyone to answer. She had a key, naturally. Marlene had boundary issues the way the ocean has water issues. She swept into Layla's kitchen like she owned the place, which she now believes she did, and she immediately started measuring the windows, actually measuring them. She had a little tape measure in her designer purse, and she was checking dimensions for new curtains, while Nola sobbed in her mother's arms. Marlene never liked Layla. From the day Garrett introduced them, she made it clear Layla was not good enough for her precious boy. Layla came from a regular middle-class family. She went to a state college. She did not have the right pedigree or the right connections, or apparently the right window treatments. For 10 years, Marlene dropped little comments about Layla's cooking, her housekeeping, her parenting, her everything. Now she was triumphant. She told Garrett she was so proud of him for finally making the right decision. She said she always knew Layla was just after his money. The irony of that statement would become clear later, but at the time, it just hurt. Garrett gave Layla 48 hours to pack her things and leave his house. His house. The house she had lived in for 8 years. The house where she raised their daughter. The house where she thought they were building a life together. 2 days to erase a decade. Layla did not sleep that night. She sat in Nola's room watching her breathe, checking her continuous glucose monitor out of habit, listening to the soft beeps that measured her daughter's blood sugar levels throughout the night. And she tried to figure out how her life had fallen apart so completely. She thought about all the signs she must have missed, the late nights at the office, the business trips that seemed to happen more and more often, the doctor dinners that ran until midnight, the way he looked at his phone and smiled, at messages she never saw. She had been so focused on being a good mother that she forgot to notice she was becoming an invisible wife. The next morning, while packing boxes in her bedroom like a guest who had overstayed her welcome, Layla found something, an expense report that had fallen behind Garrett's nightstand, probably months ago. She almost threw it away with the dust bunnies. But old habits die hard, and when you spend years auditing healthcare compliance, you cannot help but look at numbers. Something was wrong. The expense claims did not match standard protocols. Doctor dinners at restaurants that did not exist, conference fees for events she could not verify, consulting payments to companies with no web presence. Layla recognized these patterns. She had seen them 100 times in her career. This was not sloppy bookkeeping. This was fraud. She tucked that expense report into her purse. At the time, she did not know why. Maybe instinct, maybe hope, maybe just the compliance auditor in her refusing to let a discrepancy slide. But that crumpled piece of paper would change everything.
Garrett stood by the door as Layla loaded the last boxes into her car. Nola was already buckled in the back seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit, looking confused about why they were leaving their home. Garrett did not hug her goodbye. He did not even look at her. He just checked his watch like they were making him late for something more important. Layla drove away from the house she had paid for, the life she had built, and the man she thought she knew. Nola asked when they were coming back home. Layla did not have an answer, but she had that expense report, and she had 10 years of professional training that Garrett had apparently forgotten about. Before we continue, if you are enjoying this story, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. I see every single comment and I appreciate each one of you so much. Your support means the world to me. Garrett was not satisfied with just ending their marriage. He wanted to destroy Layla completely. Within days, their mutual friends stopped returning her calls. One of them finally admitted why. Garrett had been telling everyone she was mentally unstable. He said she had substance abuse problems. He hinted that she might be an unfit mother. 10 years of being a devoted wife and mom, and suddenly Layla was the villain of her own story. She found out later he had been building this narrative for months, little comments at dinner parties, concerned whispers to neighbors. He was laying the groundwork for his perfect divorce before she even knew there was a problem. The man should have been a novelist instead of a medical device executive with that kind of creative fiction skills. But the worst part came in the mail. 3 weeks before Garrett even filed for divorce, an explanation of benefits from their health insurance company, informing her that Nola was no longer covered. He had removed her from his policy. Layla's daughter, who needed an insulin pump to survive, who required continuous glucose monitoring around the clock, who could slip into diabetic ketoacidosis within hours without proper care.
Suddenly had no insurance. The first pharmacy bill arrived at their tiny rental apartment. Layla stared at the number and felt physically sick. That was more than their monthly rent. For 1 month of insulin? This was not just about money anymore. This was about her daughter's life. Garrett worked in healthcare. He sold the very devices that kept diabetic patients alive, and he was denying those same devices to his own child. She thinks that is when something shifted inside her. Fear started turning into something else, something sharper. Layla met with a divorce attorney that week, a nice woman with a cluttered office and sympathetic eyes. She looked at Layla's case, looked at Garrett's lawyer's name, and her face fell. Clayton Rourke. She actually sighed out loud. She told Layla she should probably just take whatever settlement he offered, because fighting Clayton Rourke was like fighting a tsunami with an umbrella. Great, very encouraging. Layla asked how much Rourke charged per hour, and the attorney told her. She calculated that just sneezing in that man's presence probably cost about $500. A few days later, Layla had to go to Garrett's office. During divorce proceedings, both parties have the legal right to request financial documents. She needed copies of tax returns and business statements. Garrett's secretary, a quiet woman named Gail, helped her gather what she was entitled to see.
Gail had kind eyes and a nervous habit of looking over her shoulder, but Layla barely noticed her that day because of what she saw through Garrett's office door. There she was, Bryn Hallister, 26 years old, blonde highlights, designer clothes draped over Layla's husband's desk like a human decoration. She was laughing at something Garrett said, touching his arm in that way women touch men they are sleeping with. And when she saw Layla standing in the doorway, she smiled.
Not embarrassed, not apologetic, smug. She looked at Layla like she was already yesterday's news, and Bryn was the shiny new tomorrow. The affair had been going on for 2 years. 2 years of lies, 2 years of business trips that were not business trips, 2 years of late nights at the office that were very much not about work. While Layla was home taking care of his daughter, managing his household, supporting his career, he was building a whole separate life with someone else. Layla went home and made the mistake of checking social media. Bryn's Instagram was a monument to her husband's betrayal. Photos from Paris, romantic dinners at restaurants Garrett always said were too expensive, beach vacations in places they never visited as a family. Caption after caption about living her best life, #blessed, #grateful. Layla was grateful too, grateful she had not eaten dinner yet because she definitely would have lost it. Then came Marlene's contribution to her public humiliation. She posted a long message on social media about how happy she was that her son had finally gotten rid of the gold digger who had trapped him. She wrote about how Garrett deserved better than a woman who could not even produce a healthy grandchild. She said Layla's family had defective genes. She actually typed those words where everyone could see them. The comments filled with sympathy for poor Garrett and his difficult decade married to someone like Layla. The settlement offer arrived by certified mail. Clayton Rourke's letterhead was very impressive, probably cost a fortune just to print. Garrett was being so generous, the letter explained. He would let Layla keep her personal clothing and her car, which was titled in her name anyway. Everything else went to him, the house, all investments, retirement accounts.
She would receive minimum child support based on his reported income, which she already suspected was much lower than his actual income. She had 30 days to accept this offer or face the full force of his legal team in court. Layla sat at her kitchen table in that cramped rental apartment, listening to Nola's insulin pump beep in the next room, watching the continuous glucose monitor numbers fluctuate on her phone app. And she felt something she had not felt in weeks. Not despair, not fear, clarity. Garrett had forgotten something important about her. He remembered the wife who made his dinner and raised his child and smiled at his mother's insults. He forgot the woman who used to tear apart fraudulent expense reports for a living. He forgot that before she was Layla Pemberton, the homemaker, she was Layla Mercer, the hospital compliance auditor, and she was very, very good at her job. She pulled out that crumpled expense report from her purse. The numbers still did not add up, and now she was going to find out why. Layla had not used her compliance auditing skills in 6 years, but it turns out that kind of training does not disappear. It just waits, like a computer in sleep mode, ready to wake up when you need it. She started spreading documents across her kitchen table every night after Nola went to bed. Expense reports, tax returns, credit card bills, anything she could legally obtain through divorce discovery, plus the records she had kept over the years, because compliance auditors are natural hoarders of paperwork. Her grandmother used to say that numbers do not lie, but people use numbers to lie all the time. Finding the lies was Layla's specialty, and Garrett had been lying for a very long time. She called her old college roommate, Corinne Ashworth. Corinne and Layla had studied healthcare compliance together, pulled all-nighters before certification exams together, dreamed about catching corporate criminals together.
Corinne had stayed in the field and built a successful practice specializing in pharmaceutical fraud investigations. When Layla explained her situation, Corinne did not hesitate. She said analyzing her husband's shady finances sounded like her idea of a perfect Friday night, and she was absolutely in. Corinne came over with wine, takeout Chinese food, and a legal pad. They spread everything out on Layla's living room floor like a financial crime scene. Within 2 hours, Corinne was pointing at numbers and making that face she used to make in college when she found something juicy.
She told Layla that her husband was either terrible at math or hiding a lot of money. Layla told her Garrett was actually excellent at math. Corinne smiled and said then they were going to have some fun. Meanwhile, Garrett escalated his attacks. His lawyer filed a motion for full custody of Nola. The reasoning made Layla want to scream. Garrett claimed she was financially unstable and could not provide proper care for a child with medical needs. The man who removed his own daughter from health insurance, who called her stinky and sick, now wanted full custody. He did not want to be a father. He never really had been one, but he knew threatening to take her daughter would hurt Layla more than anything else. Nola was a chess piece to him, a way to force her to surrender. But Layla was not surrendering, not anymore. The first discovery came after 3 nights of digging. Hidden accounts. Garrett had opened investment accounts at a different bank than their regular one, accounts that were never disclosed on their joint financial statements. The total in those accounts was over $200,000, money he had been siphoning from his bonus income for years, claiming it went to taxes and business expenses. Money that should have been marital property, money that would have paid for Nola's medical care without Layla lying awake at night wondering how she would afford her daughter's insulin. But the kickbacks were the real revelation.
Corinne recognized the patterns immediately. Those doctor dinners on Garrett's expense reports, the consulting fees to shell companies, the conference sponsorships that did not match any real events. These were kickbacks, payments to physicians who prescribed Garrett's company's medical devices, illegal under the anti-kickback statute, a federal crime. And Garrett had been documenting them himself, filing them as legitimate business expenses, creating a paper trail that led straight to prison. Her husband was not just cheating on her. He was committing federal health care fraud, and he had handed her the evidence on a silver platter. But there was more. The house. The house Garrett kept calling his house, the one he was so eager to keep in the divorce. Layla remembered when they bought it. She was 7 months pregnant with Nola and having complications. The doctor had put her on bed rest. Garrett said he would handle all the closing paperwork. He brought her documents to sign, and she signed them, because she trusted her husband completely. What a naive thing she had been back then. Her grandmother had passed away in their first year of marriage. She left Layla $200,000. It was the most money she had ever had, and she wanted to use it to build something meaningful. They put $175,000 down on their house. Her money, her inheritance. She had the bank transfer records. She had the closing statements showing that amount as the down payment. But when she finally looked at the deed, really looked at it, her name was not there. Garrett had put only his name on the title. He had taken her grandmother's money, used it to buy a house, and then made sure she had no legal ownership of it. Layla called Corinne at midnight to tell her. Corinne asked if she had proof of the payment. Layla told her she had bank records, the original transfer, closing documents showing the exact amount.
Corinne said Garrett was either incredibly arrogant or incredibly stupid, possibly both, and they were going to bury him. But they found more, so much more. A shadow company registered in Delaware, offshore accounts in places Layla could not pronounce, a pattern of transactions that looked exactly like textbook embezzlement. Garrett was not just hiding money from her, he was hiding money from his own business partners. He was committing fraud on a scale that went way beyond divorce court. Layla's grandmother also taught her to always keep emergency money separate. A secret savings account that nobody knows about, she would say, because you never know when life will surprise you. Layla had $8,000 in an account Garrett never knew existed. It was not much, but it was hers, and it was about to become the foundation of her fight back. She also still had her professional certifications. She had kept them current over the years, doing occasional online courses during nap times and quiet evenings. She told herself it was just in case she ever wanted to work again. Now she realized some part of her had always known this day might come. The auditor in her had been preparing for disaster, even when the wife in her believed in forever. The evidence was growing, the pieces were connecting, but Layla needed help to put it all together in a way that would hold up in court. She needed a lawyer who was not afraid of Clayton Rourke. She needed someone who would see what she saw, a path to victory hidden in Garrett's own arrogance, and she found her. Her name was Ramona Vidal, and she worked out of a small office above a bakery downtown.
No fancy reception area, no intimidating artwork, just a desk covered in case files and a woman who looked at Layla like she already knew she was going to win. Karine had found her through professional connections. Ramona had been practicing family law for 22 years, and she had beaten Clayton Rourke twice. He still pretended not to remember her name at Bar Association events, which she found absolutely delightful. Layla could not afford her normal rates. She was honest about that from the start. But Ramona looked through the evidence Layla and Karine had compiled, and her eyebrows went up higher and higher with each page. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. She said she would take the case on partial contingency, a small retainer now and a percentage of whatever they won, because they were absolutely going to win. She called Garrett's case a house of cards built on quicksand during an earthquake. Layla liked her immediately. Karine's loan covered the retainer. $8,000 from her grandmother's secret fund covered initial filing fees and document preparation. Her grandmother had been gone for 9 years, but she was still saving Layla. She thinks her grandmother would have appreciated the poetry of that. Ramona's first instructions surprised Layla. She told her to act defeated. Let Garrett think he had already won. Cry at the right moments, seem confused by legal procedures, make his lawyers comfortable in their arrogance. The more confident they became, the sloppier they would get, and sloppiness leaves evidence. So Layla played the role of the overwhelmed housewife who did not understand big, complicated legal things. When Garrett's lawyers sent intimidating letters, she responded with meek requests for more time. When Garrett himself called to gloat about his inevitable victory, she let her voice shake.
He told her she should just accept his generous offer and save herself the embarrassment of losing in court. She said she was thinking about it. He laughed and said that was the smartest thing she had done in years. Meanwhile, she was building a case that would end his career. Karine and Layla worked every night. They documented every hidden account. They traced every suspicious transfer. They calculated every dollar that should have been marital property, but somehow ended up in Garrett's secret portfolios. The total was not $200,000 anymore. When they finished counting, it was over $600,000. $600,000 hidden from their marriage, hidden from the IRS, hidden from his own business partners. Her husband was not just a cheater, he was a criminal. The evidence about Bryn was almost funny. Almost. Garrett had bought her a car, a very nice car that cost more than Layla spent on Nola's medical care in 3 years. He bought her jewelry, including a necklace worth $4,000 that Layla remembered seeing on the credit card statement and asking about. He told her it was a client gift. He also rented her an apartment so they could have their private romantic getaway spot 15 minutes from their family home. The receipts for all of this were in his business expense records, which he had claimed as tax deductions. So he was not just cheating on his wife, he was cheating on the IRS, too. They tend to frown on that sort of thing. Then Gail came forward. Gail, the quiet secretary with the kind eyes who'd helped Layla gather documents that day at Garrett's office. She called one evening, voice barely above a whisper, and asked if they could meet somewhere private. They sat in a coffee shop across town where nobody would recognize them, and Gail told Layla everything. Gail had worked for Garrett for 9 years, almost as long as his company had existed. She had watched him build his business, watched him charm physicians, and watched him slowly transform into someone she did not recognize. She had seen the fraudulent invoices. She had processed the suspicious wire transfers. She had filed the paperwork for the shell company in Delaware. For years, she told herself it was not her business. She needed the job. She was a single woman approaching retirement with no safety net. But 5 years ago, Gail's daughter went through a terrible divorce. Her daughter's husband was wealthy and connected, and he took everything. Her daughter lost her home, lost custody of her kids for 6 months, almost lost her mind. Gail watched her own child suffer while a powerful man used the legal system as a weapon. Sound familiar?
When Gail saw Garrett filing for divorce, saw how he talked about Layla and Nola, something broke inside her. Or maybe something finally healed. Gail had been keeping copies of documents for years, just in case, she told herself, just in case someone ever needed them. She handed Layla a folder that was 3 inches thick. It was everything. Records Garrett thought had been deleted, emails he assumed were gone forever, the complete paper trail of his fraud, organized chronologically and cross-referenced by transaction. Gail had been a secretary for 30 years, and apparently secretaries know where all the bodies are buried. Metaphorically speaking, of course, no actual bodies in this story. Layla asked Gail if she understood what would happen when this came out. She would lose her job, Garrett would probably try to sue her, her retirement plans would be complicated at best. Gail smiled and said she was 62 years old and she was tired of being complicit in hurting good people. Some things matter more than a pension. Besides, she added, she had already applied for a job at her cousin's accounting firm. They were expecting her to start in a couple of months. Ramona nearly cried when she saw Gail's documents.
She said this was the most beautiful evidence package she had ever received. They now had enough to win the divorce case 10 times over. But more importantly, they had enough to trigger federal investigations. Tax fraud, wire fraud, anti-kickback violations, embezzlement from business partners. Garrett was not just going to lose his divorce, he was going to lose everything he had ever stolen. If you are still here with me, I just want to say thank you for listening to this story. If it is touching your heart, please take a second to hit that like button and maybe share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your support keeps me going, and I am so grateful for every single one of you. Now let me tell you what happened next. They prepared 3 copies of the complete evidence file, one for the court, one that would be anonymously delivered to the IRS because Layla was a good citizen who believes in paying taxes, and one that would arrive at the offices of Garrett's business partners 2 days before their final hearing. They deserved to know who they were working with. The hearing was scheduled for 7 weeks after Garrett filed for divorce, expedited because of the child custody issues and Ramona's emergency motion regarding fraud in Garrett's financial declarations. The judge assigned to their case was Eleanor Hargrove, known for having zero tolerance for lying in her courtroom. Things were coming together. Garrett called Layla 2 days before the hearing. He sounded relaxed, happy even. He said he was looking forward to finally putting this behind them. He mentioned that he and Bryn were planning a trip to celebrate after his victory. The Maldives, very romantic, very expensive. He suggested she use her settlement money wisely, since it would be the last help she ever got from him. Layla said she appreciated the advice. She wished him safe travels, and she hung up the phone and laughed until she cried. He had no idea at all. The courtroom was smaller than Layla expected.
Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the faint smell of old paper and anxiety. She had dressed carefully that morning, professional, but not flashy, the kind of outfit that says, I am a responsible mother, not a gold digger. Ramona had coached her on this. Appearances matter, especially in family court. Garrett arrived with Clayton Rourke like they were walking into a victory party. Expensive suits, confident smiles, the easy body language of men who had never lost anything important. Rourke carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Layla's monthly rent. Garrett winked at him across the courtroom. Actually winked, like this was all a fun game he had already won. Marlene sat in the front row of the gallery, wearing a dress that screamed, "Look how wealthy and superior I am." She had a small notebook, probably planning to write down every humiliating detail of Layla's defeat to share with her friends later. Bryn was there too, a few rows back, checking her phone and looking bored. Layla wondered if she had started packing for the Maldives yet. And there, in the back of the gallery, sat 3 men she recognized from company events, Garrett's business partners. They had received their evidence packages 2 days ago. They had not told Garrett they were coming. Their faces were completely unreadable, which was somehow more terrifying than open anger. Judge Hargrove entered, and everyone rose. She had gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked like a librarian who had seen too much nonsense in her life and had no patience left for any more. Layla liked her immediately. Clayton Rourke presented Garrett's case first. He painted a picture of a successful businessman burdened by an unstable wife who had contributed nothing to their marriage. He talked about Garrett's generous settlement offer. He expressed concern for poor Nola, who clearly needed a stable home environment that only her father could provide. He used words like erratic and financially irresponsible and pattern of concerning behavior. It was a masterful performance, complete fiction, but masterful. Then it was Ramona's turn. She started small, simple questions about their marriage, their home, their finances. Garrett answered confidently. Yes, the house was purchased during their marriage. Yes, it was titled in his name only. No, his wife had not contributed to the purchase. She was not employed at the time. Ramona nodded thoughtfully. Then she introduced Exhibit A, the bank records showing a wire transfer of $175,000 from Layla's personal account to the closing company 8 years ago. The amount exactly matching the down payment on the house, the date exactly matching the closing date, the memo line reading house down payment in Layla's own handwriting. Garrett's smile flickered. Rourke leaned over to whisper something. The judge's eyebrows rose. Ramona introduced Exhibit B, documentation of her grandmother's estate, showing the inheritance Layla received, the source of those funds traced clearly from her grandmother's accounts to hers to the house purchase, a house that Garrett claimed she had not contributed to. The judge asked Garrett directly if he had any explanation. He stammered something about joint finances and marital contributions being complicated. She did not look convinced. Then came the hidden accounts, Exhibits C through J, investment portfolios totaling over $600,000, accounts opened solely in Garrett's name at banks Layla had never heard of, deposits that matched exactly with discrepancies in his reported business income. Money that should have been disclosed as marital assets, money that had been hidden from her and from this court. Rourke's face changed. The confident lawyer mask slipped, revealing something like panic underneath. He objected repeatedly. The judge overruled him repeatedly. Garrett was no longer smiling. He was staring at the documents like they might burst into flames if he concentrated hard enough. Ramona introduced the shell company records, the offshore accounts, the pattern of transactions that spelled fraud in letters a mile high. Then she presented the kickback documentation, payments to physicians, consulting fees that matched prescribing patterns, violations of the federal anti-kickback statute. She explained calmly that these documents had also been provided to Garrett's business partners, who were present in the courtroom today. She added that the information may also be of significant interest to certain federal agencies. Garrett turned around and saw his partners for the first time. The color drained from his face. One of them, a man named Wendell, who had always been friendly to Layla at holiday parties, just shook his head slowly. The disappointment in his eyes was devastating. Clayton Rourke asked for a recess. His hands were actually trembling. The legendary lawyer who never lost, who charged $500 just to think about your case, was coming apart at the seams. Judge Hargrove denied the recess. She wanted to see where this was going. Ramona introduced the evidence of Garrett's affair, the car he bought for Bryn, the apartment he rented for their meetings, the jewelry, including that $4,000 necklace, all claimed as business expenses, all deducted from taxes. She noted that this appeared to constitute tax fraud in addition to marital fraud. Layla glanced at Bryn. She was no longer looking at her phone. She was looking at the exit, survival instinct finally kicking in.
She slipped out of the courtroom quietly, probably realizing that the Maldives trip was not going to happen and that being associated with Garrett Pemberton was about to become very uncomfortable. Marlene sat frozen in her seat, mouth hanging open slightly. The notebook lay forgotten in her lap. This was not the story she had planned to tell her friends. Garrett tried to speak. He said this was all lies, all fabrications, that Layla had somehow manufactured evidence to destroy him. Judge Hargrove cut him off. She had seen a lot of cases in her career, she said. People lied to her all the time,
But the audacity of lying this extensively, this brazenly, while committing fraud against the spouse, business partners, and the federal government simultaneously was genuinely impressive, and not in a good way. She looked at Garrett the way you look at something unpleasant stuck to your shoe. Then she looked at Layla, and for just a moment, there was something like respect in her eyes. Judge Hargrove's ruling was everything Layla had dreamed of, and more. Full custody of Nola to her. The house, which she had paid for with her grandmother's inheritance, transferred entirely to her name. 70% of all marital assets awarded to her due to Garrett's fraud, hidden accounts, and perjury before the court. Full child support calculated on his actual income, not the fake numbers he had reported. Medical expenses for Nola covered completely, and Garrett was ordered to restore her health insurance immediately, retroactive to the day he had removed her. The man who said he wanted everything was about to lose everything. The man who told Layla to get out of his house was now legally required to get out of her house. The man who called his daughter stinky and sick would spend the next 10 years paying for her care, whether he liked it or not. But the court ruling was just the beginning of Garrett's collapse.
The federal investigation started within 3 weeks. Healthcare fraud is not something federal prosecutors take lightly, especially when it involves kickbacks to physicians, especially when it is documented this thoroughly. His assets were frozen pending investigation. His passport was flagged. The Maldives would have to wait, possibly forever. His business partners filed their own lawsuit. Embezzlement from a partnership is a serious matter, and Wendell and the others were not feeling forgiving. They wanted their money back plus damages. Garrett's lawyers, plural now, because Rourke had mysteriously developed a scheduling conflict that prevented him from continuing representation, were billing hours they would probably never collect. Marlene stopped posting on social media. Her friends had seen the court documents, which were public record. The gold digger story did not hold up well when everyone could read about her son's $600,000 in hidden accounts and his ongoing federal investigation. Layla heard through mutual acquaintances that Marlene had taken down all her posts about the divorce and was telling people she had always had concerns about Garrett's character. Some things never change. Bryn disappeared from Garrett's life approximately 45 minutes after the court ruling. The apartment he had rented for her was in his name, and with his assets frozen, rent was no longer being paid. The car was repossessed 2 weeks later. Layla did not know where Bryn went, and she found that she genuinely did not care. Bryn was a symptom, not the disease. Garrett had plenty of problems that had nothing to do with her. Gail retired on schedule. She sent Layla a card congratulating her on her victory, with a pressed flower from her garden tucked inside. She wrote that her daughter had cried happy tears reading about the case, and that sometimes justice really does win. Layla framed that card. It sits on her desk at her new job, because yes, she went back to work.
It turns out that compliance auditors who can uncover massive fraud schemes are in high demand. Corinne recommended her to several firms, and she had 3 job offers within a month. She chose the one with the best health insurance and the most flexible schedule for a single mom. Her skills had been sleeping for 6 years, but they woke up ready to work. Layla and Nola moved back into their house. Their house. She let Nola pick new colors for her bedroom, and she chose purple with silver stars. They adopted a cat from the shelter, because Nola had always wanted one, and Garrett had always said no. She named him Biscuit, and he sleeps at the foot of her bed every night. Nola's health is better now. New insulin pump, continuous glucose monitoring, regular endocrinologist visits, a stable home where she feels safe and loved. She still asks about her father sometimes. Layla tells her the truth, in age-appropriate ways. He made some bad choices. He has to deal with the consequences. They will be okay. Last month, Layla ran into Garrett at the grocery store. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by wrinkled khakis and a shirt that needed ironing. He saw her and opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Layla walked past him without stopping. She had nothing left to say to him. Some people think being quiet means being weak. Some people confuse patience with surrender. And some people really should pay more attention to their wife's career history before trying to steal everything she has. Layla's grandmother used to tell her that the universe has a long memory and a good sense of timing. She did not always believe her, but sitting in her kitchen now, watching Nola play with Biscuit in the backyard of the home she fought for, she thinks maybe her grandmother was right. Justice does not always come fast, but when it comes complete. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories. See you next time.